Question. In the Asian countries, our imams often emphasize on the length of the pants for men, that it is above the ankle. But in Western countries, I don't see it that much. Can you please explain this? Thank you. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajmain. So the way I see it is that there are a few issues that need to be addressed from this question. And I think that those issues kind of are interdependent. And I see the issues as being four, and they are. This issue of what we call isbal, which is allowing the garment for a male to go beneath the ankles. Is this matter of isbal, is it a matter which has basis in the religion? Is it something that the religion has even spoken to? That's what we have to ask ourselves. That's the first question, the first issue. The second issue is, if so, if the religion has spoken to it, and it is part of the deen to apply some level of attentiveness or importance to it, is it a matter worth emphasizing or a trivial matter of secondary importance? That's the second issue. The third issue is, if it is worth emphasizing, does the emphasis differ from time to time and place to place, or should it be emphasized regardless? Meaning, is it a thing where in some places, yeah, we should, key in on this, and in other places we can just disregard it? And last but not least of the issues, if it should be emphasized regardless, why is it not emphasized in Western countries? If we accept the assertion of the questioner that in Western countries, I just don't see the emphasis. So the first question, the first issue we said is this a matter which has basis in religion? So let's consider the following hadith, or the following two hadith. The first one is the hadith collected by Bukhari, in which the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Ma asfal min al-ka'bayni min al-izari fahuwa fi an-nar." He said, whatever hangs lower than the ankles of the lower garment is in the fire. It's coming from the Prophet ﷺ saying that whatever hangs beneath or lower than the ankles is in the fire, as if he's threatening the one who hangs his garment beyond his ankles with what? With the fire, with punishment in the fire. The next hadith was collected by Muslim. And that is the hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ said, ثَلَاثَةٌ لَا يُكَلِّمُهُمُ اللَّهُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ وَلَا يَنْظُرُ إِلَيْهِمْ وَلَا يُزَكِّيهِمْ وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ الْمُسْبِلْ إِزَارَةُ وَالْمَنَّانُ فِيمَا أَعْطَى وَالْمُنَفِّقُ سِلْعَتَهُ بِالْحَلَفِ الْكَاذِبِ. So in this hadith, the Prophet, he said, there are three to whom Allah will not speak on the day of resurrection, nor will he look at them or purify them. And for them there will be a very severe torment. They are the one whose garment hangs below his ankles, the one who boasts of the kindness he shows to another, and the one who barters his goods by swearing and lying while doing so. Now, there are many ahadith which convey similar meanings, and these ahadith all indicate that wearing a garment that hangs beyond the ankles is absolutely prohibited for males. Regardless, notice neither of these two ahadith, and there's similar ahadith beyond these, none of which mention pride or arrogance. None of those mention. It just says doing this itself is something which will bring about these consequences, this potential for punishment from Allah. So whether it is done out of pride or not, and regardless of whether it is the custom of the land in which he lives, because some people say, well, if it's the custom of the people, then you're allowed to do it. If everybody in the country does it like that, then you just have to go with what they do and ignore what the deen says. But the text is saying, regardless of it's the custom, whether or not it's the custom of the people, regardless of whether you do it out of pride or arrogance or not, it's prohibited, and this is the consequence that you could potentially suffer if you don't comply. Now that we've established that this matter is from the religion, because these are authentic hadith collected by Bukhari and Muslim, in which the Prophet is saying this is an issue from the religion. This is an issue that the religion has assigned some importance to. The second question is it a matter worth emphasizing or a trivial matter of secondary importance? So scholars have historically mentioned that whenever the Prophet ﷺ states that the potential consequence of a prohibited deed is a prescribed punishment in this world. If you do this, there is a prescribed punishment. You could have your hand cut off. You could be beaten. You could be expelled from the land for a period of time, etc. Or the threat of punishment in the hereafter. The Prophet says, if you do this, Allah will do this to you. If you do this, you'll go to the hellfire. If you do this, you'll be punished in your grave, etc. If there's a punishment in the hereafter, that makes that prohibited deed a major sin. Scholars have said this historically. One of the signs that a sin is a major sin is if there is a prescribed punishment for it in this world or a potential for punishment for it in the hereafter. If something is a major sin, brothers and sisters, it means that it must be taken very seriously, and all measures should be taken to avoid it and to discourage others from committing it. So that means that it's worth emphasizing. It's worth stressing on. It's worth stressing on and emphasizing on, and should never, never, never be trivialized. So now that we've established that, the third issue was, should the emphasis differ from time to time and place to place, or should it be emphasized regardless? The Prophet ﷺ prohibited al-isbal, dragging one's garment. Mutlaqan, absolutely. This means, if you look at the two hadith that we quoted, the Prophet said, whatever is beneath the ankles is in the fire. And there are three people who Allah will not look at. And he mentioned, and he will not purify them, and he will not speak to them on the day of judgment, and they will have a severe torment. And he mentioned one of them, al-musbil izara, the one who drags his garment or lets it hang beneath his ankle. So that's absolute. He didn't say, well, if he does it in this time, this will be the punishment, but if he does it in a different time, it'll be different. If he does it in this space or this place, it will be this punishment, but if he does it in a different space or place, it will be this punishment. He didn't say that. He made it absolute, regardless of time and space. This means that it is prohibited in every time and in every place, not just in Muslim or Muslim-dominant countries. If al-isbal is very common in a particular region like the West, and has become very common amongst Muslims living in the West, then the prevalence of the practice and the apparent ignorance regarding it or negligence concerning it makes it even more necessary for it to be emphasized and stressed by local scholars, imams, and evangelicals, so that those who are unaware of the seriousness of the matter, those who just are oblivious of the fact that there's something in Islam called hurmat al-isbal or tahrim al-isbal, that wearing your garment below your ankles is prohibited. They don't even realize that that's a thing in Islam. Those people will be alerted. And those who downplay the seriousness, those who know about it, but they become products of their environment, and they're just like, everybody's doing it, it can't be that serious. And so they just start doing it. If imams stress on it and point it out and clarify that, no, this is something that we do need to assign importance to, we do need to observe it and remain within the Islamic guidelines and boundaries concerning it, then those people will stop doing it. And so, yes, there should be an emphasis here in the West on this subject, because as the questioner points out, it just seems like something that people just don't pay attention to. They don't observe it. And most Muslims are not in compliance. They're out of compliance with the teachings. So now the question comes, the questioner said, basically in a roundabout way, why is it not emphasized in Western countries? Why is that? Can you explain why that is? And obviously anything I say is going to be speculative. And we always want to have husn al-dhan, we always want to have a positive opinion of our fellow Muslim brothers and sisters, particularly people who are busy in the field of da'wah and spreading Islam. And we want to give them the benefit of the doubt. But I just will say in general, I think one reason is that people are products of their environment. And that includes imams and evangelicals. That basically we're living in the West. And if we're not careful and very vigilant, then yeah, we start to, as they say, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. We start to do as the people around us do. And so they wear their pants long, their lower garments long, and we start to do the same thing. And we downplay what we know, or we allow ourselves to conveniently forget what we know about the prohibition of al-isbal in Islam. Another thing is, I think that once you start doing it yourself, if you're an imam or an evangelical, a da'i, a preacher of Islam, and you start engaging in al-isbal, you start lowering your garment and wearing your pants the way other people do in the West. You start to try to fit in with them. Even your dress starts to move away from what is traditionally viewed as Islamic or representative of Islamic culture, and styles unique to Islam and Islamic culture. You start to move away from that toward more Western style of dress. You start to do that, and then you come across, or you become reminded, or you're in a situation where it would be worth mentioning that isbal is prohibited. No one wants to be guilty of saying what they themselves do not do. And rather than go ahead and say the truth and hold ourselves accountable to that truth and say, I know I'm doing isbal myself, but it's wrong. I shouldn't be doing it and you shouldn't do it. Rather than do that, many of us will do what? Will remain silent. Lil-asaf. Unfortunately. We just won't speak about it. If it's an issue that we're in violation of it, we just won't speak about it. That's unfortunate, but it happens. And last but not least, I think, unfortunately, a lot of these types of issues have been wrongfully associated with extremist groups that, rather than being viewed as Islamic issues that are applicable to all Muslims, they have been seen as the calling card, the trademark of groups which are deemed undesirable by many laymen. People just look at them as deplorable, undesirable, as bad people, and they give them very bad names. They assign to them bad names, these pejorative names, that when people hear them, they automatically are filled with hostility. So to avoid being labeled and basically pigeonholed as Salafi, Wahhabi, ISIS, whatever the names that people assign to the people who are observant of these aspects of Islam, some imams, they don't want to be labeled like that. And they don't want the labeling that will come as a consequence to affect their ability to actively engage in ministry and propagating Islam, doing Islamic work. They don't want it to threaten their employment, their revenue streams at the end of the day. To avoid being labeled, some imams, some evangelicals may abandon these practices. I'm not going to do that because I don't want to be called Wahhabi. I don't want to be called Salafi. I don't want to be called this, that, and the other thing. These names which will make people look at me different, treat me different, stop following me, stop subscribing to my YouTube page, stop listening to my lectures, stop inviting me for programs and conferences, etc. People become concerned about that, and so they just what? They abandon these practices and they abandon speaking about them. But what I would say after saying all of that is that right is right. And we should call to what is right, even if many people will call us names and label us with unfavorable labels because of it. It is our job as imams, sheikhs, scholars, du'at, evangelicals, preachers, khutbah, whatever. It's our job to teach the ignorant, not to allow our scholarship to be influenced by them. What we believe and propagate, we look at what the people want, what they will accept, based upon, in many cases, based upon ignorance. They just don't know any better. We can't do that. We've got to, whatever their beliefs are about what is right and wrong, largely influenced by culture and ignorance, if those beliefs are mistaken, then we have to correct those mistakes. We have to correct those errors and teach them what is right. That's our job. And sometimes it's not easy. And sometimes we get called names and we get mistreated, but that goes with the territory. That's part of what we signed up for. As the Prophet said, أَشَدُّ النَّاسِ بَلَاءً الْأَنْبِيَاءُ ثُمَّ الْأَمْثَلُ فَالْأَمْثَلُ. He said the people who are exposed to the greatest trial are the prophets. And then those who try to be like them. Those who try to follow in their footsteps and do their work, pick up their mantle and walk with it. And so this is the reality. These are perhaps some of the reasons why we're seeing what we're seeing. But if we know something is right, even if we're not an imam, if we know something is right, then the Prophet said we're supposed to share that with others and try to guide them to the truth. As he said in the hadith, "Ballighu anni walau ayah." He said, convey from me, even if it's a single sentence. If you know something is right, call to it. Akhi, call to it. Call the people to it, but do it with gentleness, do it with wisdom, and do it with knowledge. Make sure you know what you're calling to and you know it's right before you call to it. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.